Yeah, that was the overpowering sensation at the mass grave, was the smell of dead bodies. It's something you never forget. And every once in a while, I'll smell a dead animal that's been dead for a few days, and it reminds me of that. It was horrifying to see, but the smell was the most distinctive thing. People say the Holocaust never happened, but I can swear that it did happen because I saw the effects of it.
Warning: the frontline testimony you're about to hear is, at times, extremely graphic. The realities of war are often difficult, but it's vitally important that these stories are told and the lessons are learned. Viewer discretion is advised.
My name is Bill Kongable. I am 97 years old as of February this year. I served in World War II in the 89th Infantry Division, 354th Regiment Anti-Tank Company. A patrol from our division liberated the first concentration camp on the Western Front of World War II in Germany in April at a camp called Ohrdruf. Somehow or another, our platoon passed by the mass grave outside of Ohrdruf, where they said there were probably 3,000 naked, emaciated, skin and bones bodies just thrown into one big open pit. When we went past the mass grave, there were 4 or 5 GIs with rifles on their shoulders, and it looked like they were supervising German civilians who were digging individual graves to put these bodies in. And they were having to step into this mass of bodies and grab hold of a person, and the flesh would slide off the bones when they grab it. It had to be the most disgusting, terrible thing to have to do. But we didn't stay there very long to see how many they actually buried. They had about a dozen holes dug, it looked like, for burial of the bodies from the mass grave. I suspect I've seen pictures of what they had to do at other places where there were so many bodies they couldn't possibly do anything. They just used bulldozers to bulldoze dirt over them into mass graves, covered mass graves. I would guess they probably did that to this. The patrol that liberated the camp didn't have to do any forceful liberation because the guards had abandoned the camp 2 or 3 days ahead of that and taken all the live prisoners with them on a march up to Buchenwald, which was the mother camp. And there at the camp gate there were 50 bodies of fully clad prisoners who'd been executed with a bullet to the head, and we assumed these were prisoners who couldn't go on a forced march up to Buchenwald. That was about a 30-mile hike. Inside the camp there was a shed that was partially filled with naked, emaciated bodies that were stacked up against the wall like logs. There was an area in the grounds bounded by railroad ties, which had been used as an open bonfire for burning bodies. The fire had gone out, and but there were skulls and bones scattered around among the ashes. And then there was the report of the mass grave outside the camp, which is what we saw. For some reason we went by that, but we didn't go by the main camp. Ohrdruf was a slave labor camp, and they used men to excavate caverns in the mountains in the area where the Germans planned to have underground factories and underground hangars and underground barns for tanks, so that the Allied bombers couldn't reach them beneath the mountain. As far as I know, they were all men. I think they were starved and worked to death because they were so emaciated. There was just no flesh on their bones.
It's interesting because when you look at pictures, their heads look enormous compared to their body.
And their joints look enormous.
Yeah.
The knee joint looks really huge compared to the little old bone that runs up and down the leg. The same thing with arms and elbows. The mass grave was kind of in a hollow. It looked like where there was a rise on the right and a rise on the left. And it may have been an old ravine or creek bed or something like that, but the smell was kind of down in the depression, which is where when we walked past there, we picked it up. It was very disgusting. It was just a tangled mass of skin and bones in this huge open pit. They'd just been thrown in haphazardly on top of each other, and it was just a terrible sight to see. They were, as far down as you could see, there were bodies down below what you saw on the surface. And I don't know where the estimate came from, but that's what we heard, that there were probably 3,000 bodies there. We had seen news reports in the States that the Germans were gathering up the Jews and putting them into concentration camps, but we didn't know the extent of the burning of the killing and the burning of the bodies that went on, and so it was a revelation to us. We didn't know we would come up on something like that. During my experience in Europe, I was 19 years old, and I became 20 the year after the war was over. When I turned 18 in February, the draft board chairman lived across the street from me and had known me all my life. And he said, "Billy," I went by Billy back then, he said, "We're going to let you finish high school, then we're going to draft you." And 4 days after I graduated from high school, I was inducted. So he kept his word there. I took the train down to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is where I was inducted. I spent about a week there, and then I was sent to Camp Fannin, Texas, which was up near Tyler and Longview, and it no longer exists, for infantry basic training. I think the basic training was about 3.5 months long. And from there, I joined the 89th Infantry Division in North Carolina, where they were preparing to go overseas, and I joined the 354th Regiment Anti-Tank Company and went through training on the anti-tank weapons. at Camp Butner in North Carolina. They called it the 57 millimeter rifle.
Really?
Yeah, and the reason was it had a big powder charge and a very heavy projectile, which had a very high muzzle velocity, and the the tip of the projectile had uranium in it. Not the radioactive uranium, spent uranium, which made it very, very heavy. And we were told, and we saw it in practice, that if it hit a tank in a certain way, the weight of the projectile actually melted the iron in the side of a tank and sprayed molten level all around inside the tank, which was what we were trained to do. But the first combat was that I had any experience with was when we crossed the Rhine. The commanders had decided they would have a surprise night crossing at 2 o'clock in the morning. Our anti-tank weapons were stationed on the bluff on our side of the river to cover the crossing. I forget, there must have been 5 or 6 57 millimeter weapons up there. And we could hear the people paddles knocking on the side of the metal boats, which were used. It was a 10-man boat with 4 soldiers on each side to paddle, and an engineer in the bow and an engineer in the stern. And the first company crossed, as far as I can remember, without any incident. But when the second company started to cross, the Germans opened up. They had placed machine guns and 20 millimeter anti-aircraft guns in the culverts below the road that ran across, ran along beside the river. And they had the gun set up so that there was a perfect crisscross pattern right at water level. And the E Company, I remember hearing, had 85% casualties, dead and wounded. Of course, we immediately started firing at the machine guns and anti-aircraft guns, but the projectile was just a great big solid piece of metal, and there was no explosive power to it. So we had to make a pretty direct hit in order to do any damage to the German emplacements. Our gunner must have been pretty close, because at one time one of the 20 millimeter guns turned around and started shooting up towards us. I don't remember exactly how long that took. It may have been an hour, it may have been 2 hours before the German gun emplacements were silenced. But I will never forget, in between the gunfire, you could hear the guys on the river screaming. I just can't imagine what it must have been like. Well, I was loading our gun and getting ammunition up from the guys who were handling behind, loading the gun, tapping the gunner on the shoulder, and he'd fire the gun, and we'd open a breech and throw another round in. We tried to do it just as fast as we possibly could, because we could tell it wasn't going well with the guys who were crossing the river.
Can you please tell me, this is your first time in combat, you're 19 years old, what's going on in your head?
The extreme noise was just, it was just something that's hard to explain, because our weapons were extremely noisy, and machine guns and the 20 millimeters were extremely noisy. And it was just mass confusion. But we were able to operate our own weapon without any trouble. But I forget now what the occasion was, but there was some radio transmission problem, and our captain said, "I want that gun to shoot at something particular," and so I ran down to that gun and said, "Captain says to shoot at so and so," and ran back. The Rhine River runs through a deep valley with a high, not a bluff, but a high hill on both sides. And we were on the American side with our guns pointing down towards the river. And when the Germans opened up, we were firing down into their gun emplacements. There was a town across the river, and one fella said he saw something in one of the buildings, and our gunner figured it out. I don't know how those guys could see that far. I could probably do that back then, but I couldn't now. And he put a bullet right through the side of the window where the person had been seen. But the gunners had terrific eyesight, and of course they had a gun sight too that was part of the weapon. All I could see was the tracer bullets. It was pitch dark. We couldn't see the boats. All we could see is the tracer bullets of our fire, and our projectile had a tracer on it, and in most machine guns, every fifth bullet had a tracer, so that whoever is using it knows where his fire is going. And I think the 20 millimeter guns, every bullet was a tracer. But that's all I remember is the tracer fire across the river. We couldn't see anything. We could hear the guys screaming. Fire was right at water level from both the machine guns and the anti-aircraft guns. So it just had to be catastrophic for that company. We went across the first crossing happened at 2 a.m. and we crossed the river at noon in our trucks, pulling our 57 millimeter guns behind us. There was a pontoon bridge across the river by that time. I remember going through the city of Arnstadt, which is a pretty major city, and there was a lot of damage to the buildings, but there were some buildings that looked like they'd never been hit. It wasn't complete destruction like some of the pictures you see of some of the cities that were firebombed and almost obliterated. The German people were already picking up the bricks and clearing the streets. The first German casualty that I can remember seeing was a German soldier who had been killed on the road, and his body was lying on the road, and the truck traffic and tank traffic and everything had completely obliterated the first half, bottom half of his body. So just his trunk was kind of on the side of the road, and our truck driver really didn't like that he had to run over a soldier like that, and he insisted on we help him clean the truck as soon as we stopped for the evening. Yeah, he was very superstitious and very sensitive. He said, "I don't want to touch that truck until you guys help me clean it." Only 2 people in my platoon were casualties. One of them was because his sergeant was playing with a Luger and shot him through the leg, and he had to go back to the hospital, of course. And our platoon sergeant, I wasn't with the patrol when they went out one day, and he got a bullet hole in his butt. But those are the only 2 casualties we had in our whole platoon that I know of.
Wow, so very fortunate.
Yeah, we only saw 2 German tanks. All of them were after the Rhine when we had when they had taken away our anti-tank rifles, and one was disabled and one was going in the other direction. We had bazookas in the platoon, but they weren't for long-range use. One of the interesting things that I tell is that when you're in the infantry, you're always cold, your feet are wet, your rations are not good, and you may go a month without taking a bath. And we were marching along through the woods somewhere in Germany one day complaining about the Air Force. And there were B-17 flights of B-17 flying over to drop bombs on Germany. And we were complaining about the flyboys who come over and drop a few bombs, go back home, have a beer in a pub, and sleep in a nice soft bed. And about that time we heard a plane coming from the German side. We scattered into the woods, and it was a B-24, which one engine was not running, the other one was on fire. I don't know whether it was running or not. And there were so many holes in the plane that you could see through it in places. It was at about 300 feet, and just a few seconds later we heard it crash behind us. And one of the guys said, you know, maybe it is better to fight the war with your feet on the ground rather than being up there where when you stop doing it, you die.
What life advice do you want to give to future generations, sir?
I would say be wary of politicians. We saw what happened in Germany when Hitler was legally elected and managed to gain control of the country, and we saw what happened there. And I would say, study your history. Study your town history, your county history, your state history, and your country history, because you learn from, if you learn from other people's mistakes, then you won't have to make those mistakes yourself. And the thing that I'm most worried about right now is our country and the movement there is to destroy our democracy and throw out the Constitution and create a single-party dictatorship. Democracy can be overthrown easily, I think, and I'm very worried about the state of politics right now.
What can we do to fix that, in your opinion, sir?
I'd say use your influence, if you have any, or if you don't, get some, with politicians at every level of the government. Use your political donations wisely with the people who want to preserve our democracy, and vote.
Amen. Could you please tell me, what kind of man do you want people to always think of you as in the future? What are the characteristics that are important when people think of you? What would you like them to think of, sir?
Well, first, honesty, and the desire to get along with people and be friendly. They can think of me as a veteran, but not as a hero, because I don't consider myself any kind of hero. I just happened to be there when things happened. This is a map of the route my division took from the landing at Ohrdruf all the way across to the end of the war in Germany in World War II.